Let's get some analysis. Michael Wesley, Professor of International Affairs. He's the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, International at the University of Melbourne. Professor Wesley, thanks for your time. The Biden administration pushing back that withdrawal of the final troops in Afghanistan. So much at stake there and really no certainty as to how stable that country will be beyond those troops' departure.
No, that's right. In fact, I think it's probably more accurate to say, Kieran, how unstable will the country be. I'm not aware of any public reasons that have been issued about why the deadline has been pushed back. I can't see any prospect of, in that period of time, in that intervening period of time, any real difference being made to the security situation in Afghanistan, which is really going in the wrong direction. I think the political importance of this in the United States is that there is overwhelming public opposition to US troops remaining in Afghanistan. And obviously, Joe Biden, as Donald Trump did before him, is acting on that political imperative. But you certainly could not say that the job has been done. What was intended when those troops went in almost 20 years ago, that job is not complete.
No, it certainly isn't. And 2 decades, so much lost in terms of lives and treasure. Let's turn our attention to the climate summit next week, April 22 and 23. It's going to be a virtual summit. It's interesting to see how much the government is engaged in this via their ambassador and the government itself, compared to when I remember back in 2019, the Prime Minister actually skipped some climate talks at the UN back in 2019, much more engaged 2 years on.
Well, two years on, it's become much more of a diplomatic liability to us. We know, for example, how forward-leaning on this issue the Biden administration is. John Kerry obviously made some remarks earlier this year suggesting that the United States and Australia were not on the same page in relation to urgent action on climate change. And certainly closer to home, the issue of climate change is an ongoing thorn in our relations with our South Pacific neighbours, for example. So, and also it isolates us from, to an extent, from some of the closer countries we are to in Europe as well. So I think the kind of international politics of climate change have changed in the last 6 months. And I think that the Australian government is probably seeing this as an opportunity for Australia to try and reduce some of its international isolation on this issue, to spruik some of its plans for technology-driven transitions, and to try and demonstrate that despite not setting a 2050 target, that the Australian government is definitely focused on this issue and doing what it can on this issue.
Professor Wesley, what did you make of that speech from a former Defence Minister at another university, not yours? This was at the Adelaide University, where Christopher Pyne received an honorary doctorate, and he warned of war within 5 or so years with China. Not the most uplifting of speeches to a group of uni students, but is that language helpful? What did you make of it from the former Defence Minister?
Yeah, look, I thought the language was relatively nuanced, but I think what Mr. Pyne was saying is what troubles a lot of people these days, that there is an increase in tensions in the region, that the United States and China are increasingly antagonistic towards each other, that China's actions towards Taiwan, its actions in the South China Sea, are increasingly seen as assertive and aggressive. I noticed that only yesterday the Philippines hauled in the Chinese ambassador in Manila to protest the ongoing occupation of disputed reefs in the South China Sea. and to demand that China withdraw the ships that were around those. These are all very worrying trends. I would also say that the offsetting diplomacy and diplomatic mechanisms haven't been under construction. There are no mechanisms that the United States and China can easily use to try and de-escalate tensions. The hotline, as I understand it, that was established between Beijing and Washington is not well used. It's not something that China particularly will respond to when needed. So all of the signs of possible escalation are there, and none of the mechanisms for quick and easy de-escalation have been constructed. So it is a worrying situation.
And it's worrying, and I guess there's a lot of hope in there, the situation as well, as opposed to the planning that might otherwise be the case, because of the opaque nature of the Chinese Communist Party. We just don't know where, I guess, the other power circles are within that party, and whether or not Xi Jinping is really serious about acting on Taiwan within these next 5 years.
That's right. I mean, I think China is keeping things deliberately opaque. I think that is now an established mechanism in Chinese statecraft to make a number of moves, but not articulate a particular strategy to go with those moves, to keep others guessing, to keep others, off balance. In the last few hours, in the last few days, for example, the Chinese government has been saying that it has the capability to quote unquote isolate Taiwan from forces that may be sent to help defend Taiwan. I think there is one pure rationale for that sort of rhetorical strategy, and that is to increase doubt, increase fear, and increase uncertainty in Taiwan about what China's intentions might be.
Professor Wesley, I appreciate your analysis as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.